Keep yourself in the loop.
Check out the show. It's built on the
football,
MMA
on the
from
Golden State
UFC
Media
to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast
college
for the latest news.
SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kendrick. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. We got a lot to get into today. Some of these topics, I'm in a bit of a ranting mood. I guess I would put it that way. Some of these things, I'm in a bit of a ranting mood. There are some things that have happened over the last few days, some reports that have come out, some interviews that have been done. I have a lot of thoughts on a lot of things. We're going to get into all of that, but quickly, I want to get into this. So, North Dakota State is one of the schools that you could say either unfortunately or fortunately wasn't going to have any games this season. Their season had been canceled, along with many other schools, and that was a big deal for their quarterback, Trey Lance, because he is essentially number 3 on everyone's draft boards when it comes to quarterbacks in this coming NFL draft. They place him behind Trevor Lawrence, of course, and they place him behind Justin Fields. And this was going to be a big year for him. This was going to be his last year. Show out, show what he can do again, and then hopefully either he can make his draft stock rise or it would fall, whatever it might be. And it's always interesting, at least from my point of view, it seems like the number 3 quarterback in every single draft at some point in time gets some pub, as in they could be taken like this, they could be the second quarterback taken, or they could be the first quarterback taken. I remember when Josh Allen was in the draft, he was always placed behind Darnold and Baker, and he was placed behind these guys. He was even at times placed behind Josh Rosen, and yet somehow, some way, all of a sudden the articles started coming out about how Josh Allen might get taken number 1 overall. You had, of course, Mahomes' draft with he and Watson and Trubisky, and many people had Trubisky behind Watson, kind of battling Mahomes for that number 2 spot, but then all of a sudden, everyone's talking about how Trubisky, he might be the first quarterback taken in the whole draft, and sure enough, he was. And while I think that was a drastic mistake, these kind of things can just happen. Narratives start to come out, certain guys get pub at the right time, and there was always that chance. But Trey Lance was going to have no season. He now has one game that they will play against Central Arkansas, and that will be his one showing for the season. And I think that could go either great, or it could go terribly wrong. I would probably lean with this is going to go terribly wrong for him. And the reason why I say that is because if that is his one time, if that's his one chance to show himself, I mean, wow. A great team, a great offense can have a stinker, right? A great player can have a stinker game. If Trey Lance goes out there and doesn't play well, and I'm not saying Central Arkansas, I'm not saying it's going to be a tough game for him or anything like that, but just by the off chance that there's the practice, the scheduling, it's just a bit out of whack, it's not normal for him, he's not in his groove, it's just one game, they haven't had any games up until that point to kind of warm up and get into a flow. If that game doesn't go well for him, I'm really curious as to how many teams are going to hold that against him. How far will his draft stock plummet? The league is already kind of set at quarterback. I'm just really interested to see how would it drop, but I also think that's just ridiculous. I mean, they're literally giving teams a game for just individual players at this point, is what they're doing. They're doing this strictly because of Trey Lance. And some people might think it's, some people like it, some people think it's cool, some people think it's dumb. I think I would lean more towards, I think that's kind of dumb. I don't even know why you would have the one game. I think that game could be more detrimental than good. But, it is what it is. They're gonna do whatever it is they're gonna do. But anyway, so we got a lot to get into today. I'm feeling kind of in a rant mood. There were some reports, some interviews done over the last few days, and I have a lot of thoughts on them. I want to get into Cam Newton. I want to get into some Jaguars talk, because I have a real gripe right now with the Jaguars. I'll go ahead and I'll talk about all of that. I want to get into Earl Thomas again. Some more reports have been coming out over the last few days, and it's not looking good for Earl Thomas. Let me put it that way. And then finally, I want to get into some Rodger Goodell and Colin Kaepernick. We are going to end the show on that note, that I have a lot to say about Rodger Goodell and Kaepernick. Anyways, so the Patriots have been hit extremely hard by the opt-outs, right? They have, I think it was 7 or 8 total opt-outs. They have the most in the league. They lost multiple defensive players. They lost some key offensive players. I think Marcus Cannon, he opted out. They lost their fullback. Dante Hightower, he opted out. They've had a lot of opt-outs on this team. On top of that, when it came to free agency, they lost Jamie Collins. They lost Kyle Van Noy. They just lost some players. And they didn't really do anything to replenish them. They didn't go into free agency and make a grab for a guy like Clowney. They didn't go into free agency and make a grab for a guy like Everson Griffin. They didn't go early in the free agency and grab like a Jack They didn't do anything. They literally did nothing. I think, what was it? I think their big free agent signing was like Marquise Lee. And I think Marquise Lee opted out. So, I mean, they're kind of working with nothing. And so a lot of people were looking at the Patriots early in the offseason and they were going, okay, so they have Stidham, they have Hoyer. They lost Brady. Yeah, of all the things. Also in free agency, by the way, guys, they lost Tom Brady. So he's also gone. He's in Tampa Bay now, and he's in, probably you could say, the greatest situation he has ever been in when it comes to the overall offensive talent on the team. Maybe not the best offensive line that he's ever had in the world, but it's still solid. But when it comes to the Patriots, people kind of looked at them and said, okay, so what exactly can we expect from them? With Jarrett Stidham, presumably being the starter. This guy was drafted just last year. He attempted like 4 passes before Bill literally pulled him out. They took Tom Brady out, tried to put the rookie in. He threw a pick in his first series, and then they said, all right, yeah, no, we're going to go ahead and 86 this, get him out of there. And then we never saw Jarrett Stidham again. And by all accounts in practice, he was not doing good. To put it bluntly, not doing good. He looks like a raw, young quarterback. Of course, the Patriots eventually ended up signing Cam Newton. And some people, they believe that the Patriots, they signed him kind of as a distraction because they had been fined, and I think they lost some draft picks for a filming incident in Cincinnati. That was a whole thing last season. And some people, they kind of just say it's another feather in the cap to Bill Belichick on why it is that some people say he's not the GOAT. Because he needs to cheat. Because they always find some way to try and pick up some kind of an advantage against somebody. And while I don't want to get into all of that, either way, they were found once again guilty of cheating. And they were penalized by the league. On the same day, they signed Cam Newton. And instantly, you had a lot of reports, especially out of the Boston area, people going on Boston radio, wherever it might be, saying that, they weren't sure Cam Newton could fit. They just weren't sure that Cam Newton and Bill Belichick could get along. Cam Newton, he's a louder guy. He has a lot of personality. He has a big ego. Can he check that ego at the door? Just how is it all going to work? Well, ESPN's Mike Reese on the quarterback competition in New England a few days ago said Jarrett Stidham is fading out of the quarterback picture. While he took a few 11-on-11 snaps for the first time since last Thursday at the time that this was posted, this was basically the Cam Newton show with a little Brian Hoyer mixed in. It's hard to imagine the Patriots are turning back now. Another report came out said Cam Newton is running away with the Patriots quarterback job. There was another report talking about how Cam Newton heavily controlled practice. He got the majority of the throws. He wasn't throwing any interceptions. Hoyer, he came in, did his thing, but he did have an interception, and it got to the point where Jarrett Stidham wasn't even practicing because he had a hip injury. One of my friends who is a big diehard Patriots fan, he loves the Patriots. I remember he told me, he was like, dude, I really hope Cam Newton is starting for us. And I asked him, I was like, why? And he's like, Jarrett Stidham's already thrown 7 interceptions in practice. Already. In like a 4 day span, Jarrett Stidham had apparently thrown 7 interceptions. And Hoyer, I think he said Hoyer had thrown 2, Cam had thrown 0. And one of the things that people have obviously always talked about with Cam is his accuracy. He's never really been a very accurate passer. Barely in a season has he completed over 60% of his passes. I think his career completion percentage hovers around like 59%, 60%, which is on the lower end. You would like your quarterback to be much higher than that. That's always been the knock against him. But by all accounts, he has been able to, at least for the most part, be turnover free in these practices. Here's my question to people when it comes to Cam Newton and New England and him supposedly winning this starting job, him running away with it. Are we really surprised? Like, literally, are we surprised that Cam Newton is running away with the starting job? Cam Newton, at his peak, let's just go with at his peak, he was the runaway MVP. He led a team to 15-1. He did not have any outstanding weapons on that offense. Do people remember who he was throwing to? Kelvin Benjamin was not there for that season, who was his 1,000-yard receiver when Kelvin Benjamin was a rookie. In the second year, Kelvin Benjamin was gone for the entire season. Do you remember who he was throwing to? Ted Ginn, Greg Olsen, and he was the running game. Obviously they had an outstanding defense, but they were also one of the top scoring offenses in the league. Now they had some games that came down pretty close to the wire. They almost lost to the Giants at one point that season. They obviously did end up losing to the Falcons, but other than that, it was basically a perfect season by Cam Newton. He was outstanding. While he wasn't as good in the second half of the season as he was in the first half, he still ran away with the MVP. Cam Newton is 6'6". He's probably hovering around 250, 260. He is an animal. He is an athlete. He is so just naturally talented. He can fling the ball. We see his arm strength. We see his running ability. He's bigger than most players on the field. How are we surprised that he's running away with this? How are we surprised at all? How did anybody really think that Cam Newton was going to be in a competition with Jarrett Stidham and Brian Hoyer? How did anybody think this? The only reason why I believe there is still a chance Cam Newton doesn't start week 1, plain and simple, is just because I think Bill Belichick wants to kick off the season with a guaranteed win. And I think that Brian Hoyer, he's been in the system much longer. Brian Hoyer, I do believe, understands it better than Cam Newton. And, Bill Belichick, he looks at the schedule. He sees that they kick off the season against the Dolphins. The Dolphins, I still don't think they're sure about who their starter's going to be. I've seen some reports, they're saying that Tua is looking like he could be the backup. Some are saying that he could start the season as the third stringer. That he could start not only behind Fitzpatrick, but he could even start that he could be behind Rosen. And I think that if they were going to do that, it would simply be for his safety. I really do think that. I think that if they were to do that, it would be simply for his safety. That they just simply didn't want him to get hurt. They didn't want him to get killed. They were basing this entirely off of how he was doing in practice, by the way. They were, Rosen has performed a bit better than Tua has. And so they were saying that Rosen, at least at the moment, is supposed to be their backup, but there is a competition there. Either way, it seems like the train is rolling, for the Dolphins to start Fitzpatrick. So, against this Miami team that does have an improved defense, right? They do, I think they would be bringing Xavier Howard back, who was their best cornerback. They signed Byron Jones. They made some other signings. I think they brought in Shaq Lawson, brought in some other players. They did draft, I think they drafted another corner as well, but they drafted some offensive line help. They still do have Devontae Parker. Ryan Fitzpatrick is a gunslinger, and he is still mobile even at his advanced age in the quarterback realm of things. I think, what is he, 30? I think Fitzpatrick, what is he, 36, 37, something like that? But he can still move. But I do think that Bill Belichick wants to kick off the season, at least on a high note. So, if it's not Cam Newton, I think it would be Brian Hoyer, simply because he does understand the system. But just leaving all that, man, Cam Newton, he got such a bad rap. I think the Panthers, they did Cam Newton so dirty with the way that they let him go. Matt Rule went out there saying, Cam Newton's gonna be our guy. That we plan to start the season with him. We have no plans or anything. Oh, and then they go ahead and they sign Teddy Bridgewater. But then all of a sudden they're saying, no, but we still want to keep Cam Newton. We don't have any plans. We love Cam. We might have a bit of a quarterback competition here. And then all of a sudden they go ahead and they cut Cam Newton. They didn't even trade him. They just flat out cut him. I have a very, very hard time believing that Cam Newton didn't have a trade market. That's just me, though. That's my personal opinion. If you can trade Nick Foles for a 4th round pick, when all Nick Foles really does have to his name, if we're going to be honest, all Nick Foles has to his name is that one spectacular season with Philadelphia, and he has the playoff run with the Eagles. Those are the only things that he has. He doesn't have a long track record of success. He doesn't have this long track record of just blowing people away with his play. He's been up and down his whole career. The Jags were still able to trade him. How did the Panthers not trade Cam Newton? They cut him, and then, as he kind of phrased it, they just kind of left him out to die. The narrative at that point on Cam Newton was not good. Many people trying to attack his character. I never thought it was fair. This guy was a Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee. He was fantastic for the community when he was with the Panthers. I never understood it. And I especially did not understand. Well, I won't say that. I have my own theories on why it is that when he was signed by the Patriots, he was so heavily criticized. I have my own thoughts about that. But when I look at the Patriots' schedule, and I think about if Cam Newton was starter, let's just say Cam Newton was the starter from week 1. Let's just go like 8 games in. So the first 8 games. So they start the season against the Dolphins. I will go ahead and give the Patriots a win there. Even it's at New England, and even though there's no such thing really as a home field advantage anymore, I would just go ahead and give that to Cam Newton and Bill Belichick. I think that Bill Belichick's secondary is still good enough that whether it was Fitzpatrick or whether it was whether it was Tua or whoever it is that's starting, I think that Bill Belichick is still smart enough. He has all the time in the world to prepare for this game. When you give Bill Belichick extra time to prepare for an opponent, he usually embarrasses them. And while I do think that the opt-outs do hurt, I just think that the Patriots will be able to win that game. They move on and they face the Seahawks. Not an easy challenge. I do believe that they will lose that game. Then they go against the Raiders. I think that the Raiders, they are now dealing with some injuries. Tyrell Williams, who's been throughout his career really a big play kind of receiver, he is currently hurt. I think he has a torn labrum, and while he said he wants to try and play through it, I don't think it's going to work out that great. They do have Hunter Renfrow, who's a really, really good slot receiver and has been very, very impressive. They did draft 2 receivers, Henry Ruggs and somebody else, I can't remember the name, but they did draft two receivers, so it seems like they're going to lean heavily on them. They still do have Darren Waller, but again, Raiders defense is not good. I think that Bill Belichick will be able to come up, and Josh McDaniels will be able to come up with a really, really good game plan to take advantage of their linebackers, take advantage of their lack of a secondary, lack of a pass rush, all those things, and I think they'll be able to win that game. So I think coming out of the gate, they'll be 2-1. Then they go against the Chiefs. Yeah, that's an L. And then they go against the Broncos. I'm honestly going to say they're going to win that game. I really do believe. I think the only reason why they wouldn't will be because the Broncos defense is just smothering, and they're going to wreak havoc on Cam Newton. But other than that, I don't know if I trust Denver's offense, and I trust a younger quarterback against Bill Belichick. Remember, there's that crazy stat out there that Bill Belichick had only lost to a quarterback like under the age of, what was it, 25 or something like that, like one time, and other than that, he had won every other meeting with those. I don't remember the exact age, But he doesn't lose to younger quarterbacks. Drew Lock, this is only his second year. This will be his season being the starter and everything, being the full-time starter, but really, really strange training camp, strange practices, no preseason. They lost one of their top tackles. I don't know if I can give it to a younger quarterback against Bill Belichick, and it's just the respect I have for Bill Belichick and what he does to younger players. So I'm going to go ahead and say they're going to win that game. Then they're going to go against the Niners. I'll put them down for an L right there. So, I mean, through the first 6 games, I have them at 3-3. And that's with Cam Newton being the full-time starter. Then they go against the Bills. I'm really hesitant I would love to take the Bills. I would love to say the Bills are going to win the game. The problem is, I still don't trust Josh Allen. Josh Allen against the Patriots is not good. He's never had a good game against the Patriots. I'm not even sure if he's ever had necessarily a good game in general in the NFL, especially by his QBRs. His ratings with Pro Football Focus they're just bad. They're really just bad. But I think he might be a guy where you kind of have to look outside the stats, I guess, maybe. I really don't know. I'll go ahead and say the Patriots are going to win that game, and then they go and they take on the Jets. I will say the Patriots win that game. So, I mean, at that point in time, they're 5-3. And then they go and they take on the Ravens, and like that, of course, I think it's going to be an L. They take on the Texans. I think it's going to be an L. They take on the Cardinals. That could be an L. I like Kyler Murray. I don't really like their defense over there. But ultimately, I think that it's shaping up for New England to be really close to like an 8-8 kind of team. I think the over-under has them at 9. There's some people out there who are betting under, and they're saying that there's no way the Patriots are going to be that good. I think that with Cam Newton being on this team, them being able to run some things they've never been able to run before, I still like Cam Newton. I respect Cam Newton's game. Is he the most accurate in the world? No, but I think Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels will be able to come up with something to really help him with that, utilizing the running backs, utilizing their slot receivers and everything. I think that the Patriots could probably end the season around 500, maybe like 7-9, 8-8, 9-7. I do think that they can be a playoff team. Again, I haven't looked at their full schedule. I just looked at part of it right there, and that's just kind of how I would predict it. I think against some of these better teams, like a Ravens, the Seahawks, the Chiefs, the Texans, I think they're going to get swamped. But against some of these other teams that are kind of hovering around could be good, like the Bills and maybe the Broncos. I think that those games could go either way. Those games really could go either way. I would take them against a team like the Raiders because their defense is just that bad. I take them against the Buffalo Bills because I just do not like Josh Allen against Bill Belichick. That is still such a mismatch. Maybe he becomes more accurate this offseason. Maybe Stephon Diggs is the cure for his inaccuracy. I have no idea. I really have I have no clue. But I just think, I'm not surprised that Cam Newton is running away with the job. I'm not. I think the disrespect to Cam Newton has been so intense, and I don't understand it. I think Cam Newton Cam Newton should have been picked up by a team like the moment he got cut. And I understand that you couldn't give these players physicals, you couldn't give them that kind of stuff, so you never knew exactly how healthy some of these players are. Well, now you can. I just think Cam Newton, I think a team like the Chargers, they really could have used Cam Newton. I like Taylor a lot. I do. I like Taylor. I have been pumping up Taylor on this podcast. But I do think Cam Newton there would have been probably even better. I just think there were a lot of teams that really could have used Cam, and I'm glad that the Patriots got him, and I think the Patriots are going to be really, really fun to watch this coming season. Anyways, coming up next, we're going to talk some Jaguars. What a poorly run franchise they are. I think the Jags are going to make some serious mistakes this coming season and this coming off season. We're going to get into all of that coming up next.
Listen up, sports bettors. This is Bryson Ethan here to tell you about our favorite sports book, and that's BetUS. Football, basketball, and baseball are all back, and that means it's time to get down your bets. We only endorse one sports book, and that is BetUS.com. Why, you ask? BetUS is the pioneer in online betting with more than 25 years in the biz. You need a sports book with integrity and longevity, and you need to know that you're going to get paid.
That's right, Bryce. You need a sports book that offers everything, including live betting, MMA, golf, horses, esports, entertainment, and all kinds of crazy prop bets and futures. So call today at 1-800-MyBetUS. That's 1-800-MyBetUS, and they will walk you through getting started. Nobody in the industry gives better bonuses or bigger bonuses than BetUS. Join now, mention GSMC, and you get up to 150% in bonuses on your first deposit. Nobody beats that. We bet at BetUS, and so should you. So join BetUS today. That's BetUS.com, or call 1-800-MyBetUS, mention GSMC, and get 150% in bonuses on your first deposit.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about Cam Newton and how he is basically running away with the starting job in New England. I'm just not surprised. Cam Newton, former number 1 overall pick. He is 6'6". He's like 250, 260. He can run. He can absolutely sling the football. Not the most accurate, but he makes up for it in other ways. Man, you gotta let him play his game. You look at the NFL nowadays, and although Cam Newton has taken a lot of hits, and maybe he's taken more hits than he should have in his career, you look at how this game's going with guys like Josh Allen, like Lamar Jackson, Minshew, Wilson, Mahomes, everything. The game is more towards these passers who can run. And while all of them I would say are better passers, well, not Josh Allen. I will not give it to Josh Allen. Josh Allen is not Cam Newton. He's not even Cam Newton as a runner. I don't think he's Cam Newton as a thrower. Even though their completion percentage are actually kind of similar. I would still take Cam Newton over Josh Allen. I've seen Cam Newton at his peak. I'm not sure what Josh Allen at his peak looks like yet. This could be his peak. This could just be who he is. I don't know. But nonetheless, I just think that Cam Newton was grossly disrespected, grossly discarded by the Panthers, and I'm happy that he is finding his stride with New England. Don't know what it's going to mean for them in the win category. I don't know how Cam Newton's stats are going to look. I have always said I think the most important thing is just that he's a good soldier with the team, that he, looks good. That they can at least maybe be close to 500. Don't look incompetent. Don't look like he can't play. Hopefully they do put him in a good system that is really tailored to what he does well, so that he can actually show everyone that he is still Cam Newton. Maybe not the Cam Newton of 2015, but that he is still a viable starter in this league. Anyways. So, in this coming NFL draft, as I kind of mentioned at the very beginning of the show, there are going to be 3 quarterbacks in this draft who are viewed as being starters, as they could be starters in this league. And it's Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and Trey Lance. Trey Lance, obviously, he is going to get 1 game to basically showcase his talents, and that's it. I don't know if it's going to work I don't know if it's going to go good for him. I would lean with it's probably going to be a pretty average game just because of how wonky everything is. But I could be wrong. Maybe he lights it up and maybe he looks incredible and maybe his draft stock goes even higher. I really have no idea. But some people, they've looked at a team like the Patriots, and there's those who think that the Patriots, with all their draft picks that they have, just because they've just been collecting, whether it's compensatory picks or whatever it is, they just make a random trade of a player who that maybe they never even really planned on using. Whatever it is, they always seem to have so many draft picks. And there's those who believe that they could package a bunch of those, and they could put them into maybe, say, the 2nd overall pick, maybe the 3rd overall pick. Maybe they could package enough together to just get higher in the first round into the top 10. And because there are so many teams in the league that have their quarterback, maybe they could get one of these three possible franchise quarterbacks later in the first round, whatever it might be. Maybe if they follow the 10, I'm pretty sure no matter what, Trevor Lawrence will probably go number 1. I feel like Fields will probably go number 2, maybe number 3. I don't know exactly where Trey Lance falls, but there's those who believe that the Patriots could be building up to try and draft one of these quarterbacks, because they don't really believe, it doesn't seem like they believe in Jared Stidham. It will not be Brian Hoyer. Will it be Cam Newton for the long run? People don't really believe so. They believe this is kind of that 1-year rental. You play with Cam Newton, just have some fun this season, and then you move on from him, and Cam Newton goes to some other team where hopefully he can get a big payday again. There's a team that I really do believe, if they would just embrace their starter, if they would just embrace the guy that they have, they could really have something. And I don't think they're going to do it. The Jacksonville Jaguars. They drafted Gardner Minshew last year in the later rounds. Gardner Minshew in college was a really good quarterback. Did some moving around, but he was a really, really good quarterback. And they ended up taking him. He ended up starting a lot earlier than I think the Jags had ever anticipated, because Nick Foles got hurt game number 1. Minshew came in, he kind of struggled, he didn't look very prepared, but then the next game, and in every other game he started after that, the dude looked really good. And everyone's talking about how impressive Kyler Murray is, and he was the offensive rookie of the year, and oh god, he was clearly the best The Pro Football Focus had Gardner Minshew ranked as their top rookie quarterback last year. He had the highest grade among every rookie quarterback. Not only that, I'm going to throw some stats out to you about some areas that Gardner Minshew ranked, and I think some of these will probably blow your mind. The highest graded quarterbacks in the red zone last season. Ryan Tannehill was number 1, Drew Brees was number 2, Lamar Jackson was number 3, Gardner Minshew was number 4. The highest graded quarterbacks on 20-yard throws down the field. Russell Wilson was number 1, Deshaun Watson was number 2. Gardner Minshew was number 3, with a 94.7 rating on throws 20 yards down the field. The league leaders in scramble yards. Lamar Jackson, of course, was number 1. Behind him was Gardner Minshew at number 2, with 350 yards. You look at passer rating on throws 20 yards down the field. 20 plus yards down the field. Gardner Minshew led the league with a quarterback rating, with a passer rating of 129. Behind him was Mahomes with a rating of 122.9. So not miles ahead of Mahomes, but he was the number 1 quarterback. And a couple days ago, Gardner Minshew, he was asked on what if the Jags were to draft a quarterback in 2021. And he said, if you do draft a quarterback, you'll probably regret it in a year. Gardner Minshew, if there's anything that he hasn't been afraid to talk about, to be confident, to show his confidence. He has not shied away from it. And that has rubbed some people the wrong way. I think he made a quote regarding Offensive Rookie of the Year, and who the best rookie quarterback was in the season, and he said it was himself, and I think he said some other things that kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. He came out and he apologized for it. And really, I think there's only a couple reasons as to why it is that they would not be sold on at least having Gardner Minshew as their starter, at least letting him play out like his rookie deal, giving him this season, giving him another season, actually giving him a couple seasons to try and be their starter. I think there's only a few reasons as to why they wouldn't. Number 1, it is because he's a late round pick. And teams are not usually bought into their later round picks. Even as good as Minshew performed last year, I think they would look at it as he just overachieved. I think they would look at it as, I mean, he had a nice season for a 6th round pick. He had a nice season. They're not invested in him the way that the Browns were invested in Baker, or the way that the Jets are invested in Sam Darnold, or the Bills are invested in Josh Allen. And I know I bring that up, and I bring up how, the Cardinals, they went ahead and they got rid of Rosen after one season, and he was a 1st round pick, and that shocked me. That shocked the whole NFL world that they moved off of Josh Rosen that quickly, because it just doesn't happen. I think that there's that comes into play. I think there's the fact that Gardner Minshew has kind of been related to, he's like Baker Mayfield. He looks kind of a lot like Baker. They're kind of the same size, the same stature. They have somewhat the same game. Even though this past season, Gardner Minshew's rookie year was far better than Baker Mayfield's sophomore year. But they bring up, their personality kind of seems to be the same. Both of them, they clearly have a confidence about themselves, and they're not afraid to talk about it, and they're not afraid to show it, and that always does rub some people the wrong way. And the other thing is simply, kind of the Arizona Cardinals effect. I think Jacksonville could end up falling into this position where after the season, they're gonna fire their head coach. I think after the season, they could fire Doug Marrone. I think Doug Marrone, he has shown, and the thing, Jacksonville though, I have a hard time blaming it on Doug Marrone because I think Jacksonville itself is a bad organization. They've had multiple head coaches. It just never seems to work. And even with Doug Marrone, it's like it worked for a season, but as they bring up, a fish rots from the head down. There's only so many times it's the head coach's fault before it's actually just the organization's fault. You could, i.e. the Browns. How many times are they going to fire a head coach before you realize, dude, it is just the franchise. It's who's in charge. It's the owner. It's who's running the football operations. They're just not good. I think that could come into play with Jacksonville. But I think after the season, once they once again missed the playoffs and they finished below 500, I think they would fire Doug Marrone, and I think they would have a top 10 pick. And I think that they will look around at their position, look around at some of the possible head coaches to hire, and I think they could go and target a head coach. I don't know who, but I think they could target a head coach, ask them, who is a quarterback you like? Who's the quarterback you like right now, whether it be in the NFL or just in the draft? Who do you like? And if they said, oh, I like Trey Lance. Or it said, I like Justin Fields. And then maybe Jacksonville somehow is able to mortgage some picks, maybe mortgage a player. I'll bring up a player in a second that I don't understand why they haven't moved yet, but I think they could move up higher in the 1st round and they could guarantee themselves to take either Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, depending on who they like more. I think they would do it. If the situation came about, I don't know if they could pass it up. They might do Minshew the way that the Cardinals did Rosen. It just is even more shocking with Rosen because he was a 1st round pick. Minshew, in this case, he was a 6th rounder. A player that I do not understand why the Jacksonville Jaguars have not moved off of is Yannick Ngakoue. Why have they not traded Yannick Ngakoue? He doesn't want to be there. He has been as vocal about getting out of Jacksonville as Jalen Ramsey was. And you know what they did? They traded Ramsey to the Rams, I think in exchange for like 2 firsts and like a 2nd or a 3rd. I mean, it was a ridiculous haul. They got a lot for Jalen Ramsey. But again, I am one of those people who does believe I would rather have the surefire player than take my chances on a draft pick. That is just me though. In this particular situation, Jacksonville knew Ramsey was not going to re-sign. He knew that he wasn't going to play there under like a franchise tag. They needed to get rid of him. They got a haul. In the case of Yannick Ngakoue, he is not going to play for this team. He hasn't signed his franchise tag. He has been vocal since the end of the season that he wanted out. He has exchanged multiple tweets with one of the part owners of the team, Tony Khan, who he was very vocal. He told Tony Khan, if I can remember some of the conversation, he told him at one point, stop hiding. Tony Khan responded and said he's not hiding. As soon as a team gives us a good offer, we would be more than happy to trade you. But until then, we're going to go ahead and keep you. And the Yannick Ngakoue, he is another one of these players who I think really exceeded expectations. He was a 3rd round pick His rookie year, he looked like a third-round rookie, but then his second year, that Jacksonville year, the team exploded. And the defense was clicking all cylinders. Yannick Ngakoue was, I think, in the top 10 when it came to sacks. He was top 10 when it came to his Pro Football Focus grade for an edge rusher. He had one of the best pass rushing grades in the league. I mean, he looked outstanding. He's not much of a run defender. Run defending is not his specialty. He is a guy you tell to go and rush the passer. That is what he is. Now, since the Jacksonville year, though, he has not had the same kind of production. It just hasn't been there. His production since then has really tapered off. His grades have not been nearly what they were, but this past 2 seasons, he has had grades of 72. So basically, you had his rookie year, you go ahead and you throw out that year. His second year, he had like an 87, I think was his overall grade, and then you go to his the next 2 seasons, he had 72, 72. So I think kind of what we have seen from Yannick Ngakoue through the first 4 years of his career is that his high end is he's one of the best pass rushers in the league. His low end is he's a good, not great pass rusher. And I think that's kind of what has played into him not being traded. My thing is that Jacksonville, clearly they liked him enough. They have an affinity with him enough to give him the franchise tag, meaning they didn't want him to go away. They saw what he did that year. Obviously, they see more film of him in practice and everything than I do, so they really like Yannick. And they like him enough to where they're like, man, we want a good trade for you. Like, we're not just going to give you to another team. We want to actually get something good for you. And I saw some early reports, this is probably going on like a month ago, I saw reports that there was a team that offered Jacksonville a couple 2 first-round picks and a starting player who was a Pro Bowler. And they still didn't accept the deal. And then I saw there was who was it? I think it was their GM. Their GM went on Sirius XM NFL radio, and he talked about the Yannick Ngakoue rumors. He said, "The unsubstantiated report caught me off guard too. If he's being traded, I wish someone would let me know. Obviously, we've had discussions with teams, but that report was pretty erroneous." That report came out on, that was August 20th. I do not get why they haven't traded him. This reminds me of the Le'Veon Bell situation, and the Steelers organization is far, far better than Jacksonville's. Way better ran. There hasn't been the coaching influx. There hasn't been the talent, and I wouldn't not necessarily the talent influx, but like they've kept the culture the same. They're able to re-sign their good players. Players want to play in Pittsburgh. No one really wants to go and play in Jacksonville. No one really wants to go there. No one really wants to get drafted there. But I look at this situation with Yannick Ngakoue, and I'm just like, guys, you're tying a lot of money to him. If he doesn't sign the franchise tag, especially, right? If he doesn't sign the franchise tag, and they keep it on him, that's money that just doesn't go anywhere. They just can't use it until they take it off of him. And I don't know I don't remember what the cap hit is for a defensive end franchise tag, but I think it's over $15 million. So you're going to tie over $15 million into a player who isn't going to play for you for what? I mean, it really is. Like, for what? What is the point? So that he doesn't go and play somewhere. What is it, to send a message? Look at how that worked out for Pittsburgh. That season, they missed the playoffs. Now Le'Veon Bell is with the Jets, and I mean, he's doing his own thing. I don't know, he's not looking great, but the Jets aren't great. My question, just what do you get out of keeping Yannick Ngakoue? At some point in time, wouldn't you rather get something for the player rather than try and send a message and then just let them go for nothing? Wouldn't you rather do that? Wouldn't you rather get a 3rd round pick if you can? Wouldn't you rather get a 2nd round pick if you can? You drafted him with a 3rd. If you got a 2nd, you basically upgraded. And again, Yannick Ngakoue, I think he's a good player. While his last 2 seasons haven't been what he was his second year, I still think he's a good player. I think he just needs to be in a better situation. He needs more motivation around him. Because I think he knows, and Ramsey knew, and a lot of the players on Jacksonville knew they weren't going to go anywhere. Especially when Blake Bortles was their quarterback. They knew that they had a ceiling. They knew they weren't going to go anywhere. So where's the motivation? I really don't get what Jacksonville's doing. I think that this coming off season, they could be making some serious mistakes. I think it would be a mistake to give up on Minshew this early when, by all accounts, he was the best rookie quarterback last year. And I think it'd be a mistake if they didn't do anything with Ngakoue this season, and then all of a sudden, you just lose him next year for nothing. And ultimately for what? To just prove a point. Or to send a message to the team that you're not gonna demand your way out of here. It's stupid. It's so stupid. Jacksonville is such a poorly run franchise. And there's a reason why there was talk about this team possibly being moved to London. The fact that this team was once again gonna play outside of America. Because their arena, their stadium, it's just not filled. They're not filling seats. They're not putting butts in seats. The fans have nothing to root for. What are they rooting for? For a few years, it was Blake Bortles. It was Blaine Gabbert. And then also there was Nick Foles, and it seemed like maybe it'd work, and then he got hurt. And then it was Minshew Mania, and it actually looked really, really fun. And then there's reports, though, that Jacksonville could really look at drafting a quarterback this next year. And I just don't get it. I guess, look, if Jacksonville has a chance to draft Trevor Lawrence, if they somehow manage to get, like, the number 1 overall pick or something, then, okay, yeah, sure, I get that. This guy's supposed to be like Andrew Luck. He's supposed to be a franchise savior. He's that good. Won the title as a true freshman. I get it. But I just think giving up on Minshew too quickly like that doesn't bode well for the franchise. And I don't think it makes other players want to go and play there. Because, they're going to look at that and go, okay, well, even if I perform well, I could get traded. Something could happen to me. And then there's politics that play into it. Like, even if Minshew was beating Trevor Lawrence in practice and everything, right? Even if he was performing better, there's politics. They would somehow figure out a way to make Trevor Lawrence the starter. They'd figure out a way to make Justin Fields the starter or whatever it was. I just don't think it's fair, but I think it says a lot about this damn franchise. Anyways, coming up next, we're going to talk some Earl Thomas. Some more reports have come out about him in Dallas and other teams that might be looking at him. I want to talk about that. And coming up later, my final topic of the day, we're going to talk some Rodger Goodell, talk some Kaepernick. Goodell did an interview with one Emmanuel Acho, former NFL player. His brother is the head of the NFLPA. I think recently got reelected, and he did an interview with Goodell. I want to talk about that. Got lots of thoughts. The rant is coming. That later. Stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to Extreme Cage Fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about the Jaguars, Yannick Ngakoue, Gardner Minshew. Basically, I think that this franchise is going to make some big mistakes, or could potentially make some big mistakes in the coming next few years, really. I mean, this is a franchise in the last 10 years, in the last 10 plus years, they have won the division one time, and it was the Saxonville year, and other than that, they are perpetually one of the worst teams in the AFC. They're perpetually one of the worst teams in the AFC South. I don't think they're gonna finish last in the division this year. At least, well, I mean, they could probably finish last, but I just don't think they're going to be like a 2-win team like some people predict. I honestly do think they have enough offensive talent, and I like Gardner Minshew, I like Chark, I like Westbrook, their offensive line I think they have enough talent there to win a couple of games. They could still end up finishing last in the AFC South though, because I honestly, the Colts with Rivers, I do like, and I like their defense. I like Tennessee with Tannehill, I like the Houston Texans. It's going to be a really, really competitive division. But at the end of the day, I do think that this franchise has made a lot of mistakes. I think they're making one with Ngakoue. They should trade him. And with Minshew, I honestly think they should be giving him a real chance to be their starter. I think he could really build off of his rookie year. But by all accounts, it seems like they are actually leaning towards the quarterbacks in this coming NFL draft. So I guess it is what it is. But anyways, so Earl Thomas, I talked about him in my last podcast. He had been released from the Ravens, and at that point in time, it kind of came down to, alright, now where's going to be his next home? For those of you who do not know what happened with Earl Thomas, basically, he got involved in a fight with safety Chuck Clark, and what ended up happening is Earl blitzed during their practice, during scrimmages, I guess, and it left a guy kind of open, coverage breakdown. It was a touchdown. Chuck Clark, his teammate who was on the field at the time, he was really, really upset. He took off his helmet, and Earl came over to him, essentially said, "It's cool." And Chuck Clark, an exact quote from him, as reported by NFL Network's Mike Silver, he said, "No, it's not. You need to go to meetings and walk through, and maybe you'll get it." And that is what prompted the fight between the two, and ultimately Earl Thomas ended up punching Chuck Clark. He was sent home, and promptly he was released by the Ravens shortly after. And by all accounts, in some of the reports, he was voted off by the team captains on the team. Like, the team captains didn't want him on the team anymore. They were fed up with Earl. And a lot of people might be thinking to themselves, well, that seems really, really unlike Earl, right? When Earl was with Seattle, he was known as one of the top safeties in the league. He was that staple member of the Legion of Boom. He was a leader on the field. He was well respected around the league. And I'm not saying he's still not well respected, but it was the image of him right now was not good. Okay? When he was released by the Ravens, 3 teams were named as top viable candidates to sign him. One was the Texans. The Texans said they had no interest. One was the Niners. Kyle Shanahan said they have no interest. He just shut down the rumors. He said, "We are not interested." Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, they said that they should be the front runner. I even said I thought the Cowboys could take a flyer, maybe should take a flyer on Earl Thomas, and I thought they would because Jerry Jones really, really likes big names. But Ian Rappaport reported that the Cowboys are not going to sign him, that they do not plan to. Jerry Jones, of course, he kind of came out and he disputed it, and he said, the buck stops with me, and I'm the only person whose word really matters. So while he's kind of, I guess, left the door open to sign him, by all accounts, they are not going to sign Earl Thomas. So this guy, who at one point in time was regarded as the best safety in the league, who at one point in time was one of the most feared defenders in the league. He was a feared member on that Seattle defense. He has now been relegated to what team wants to take this guy who seems to be at this point in time a locker room deterrent? Who wants to take a chance on this guy? NFL Network's Mike Silver, he was doing an interview I think he was just talking on the NFL Network, and he was talking about Earl's time with the Ravens and how his time with the Ravens was rocky from the start. He had been late to some meetings. At one time he was late to a meeting because he said he needed to get his car washed. Look, in any walk of life, that's not an excuse to skip a meeting. Because your car you can get your car washed at literally any time of the day. And if it's not an actual car wash, you can do it yourself. You can do it any time of the day. There is no way in hell your car is that dirty to where it needs to be washed that moment and you're going to skip a meeting. That just doesn't make any sense. The Ravens fined him multiple times, and to the point where they warned him and said, hey, if this continues, we are going to find this under conduct detrimental to the team. And of course, what conduct detrimental to the team means is they can go ahead and void your guaranteed money, and they can essentially cut you for nothing, and they can go after your signing bonus. They can actually attempt to get some of the money back from you. Of course, he had the incident with Brandon Williams, one of the better defensive line players on the Ravens. Big dude. Earl had a problem with him. It was just not a good situation from the get-go, which is really, really interesting. Because you look at the Ravens and you think about their culture that was instituted there by Ray Lewis, by an Ed Reed, by Shannon Sharp, by the good players they've had, Terrell Suggs, all the great players they've had there. And then you look at their head coach, John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh is one of the most player-friendly coaches in the league. One of the most player-friendly coaches. He loves his players. He's never really seen to be a screamer. He has never, I haven't ever seen really a bad report about John Harbaugh and his relationship with his players. Another team that has a strong culture, that has a player-friendly coach, where there has never really been a report about having bad relationships with any of their guys, is the Seahawks and Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll has made his living off of being a player-friendly coach. He's all about getting out there and practicing with the guys, putting on you saw him with DK Metcalf, taking his shirt off, flexing with DK. I mean, he is a player-friendly coach through and through. The Seattle culture that was instituted there, in part by Earl Thomas with that Legion of Boom. It's the 12th man, everything. Russell Wilson, Surely but surely, of course, some of the defensive players kind of, I guess you could say, mutinied against the team. And Earl, I think, was kind of one of the names that got brought up, along with Michael Bennett, along with a Richard Sherman. Some of the guys that kind of started to speak out thought that Pete Carroll liked Russell Wilson a bit too much and protected him, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Nonetheless, it was a player-friendly organization. And Earl, this is what's kind of crazy about it, is that Earl, he goes to Seattle drafted him in the first round over other safeties who were regarded higher than him. They drafted him in the first round. At the time they extended him, they made him the highest paid safety in the league. And Earl, on his way out, because he didn't like the fact that they wouldn't extend him, he flipped off Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks on his way out. I mean, the last image of Earl Thomas in Seattle is him giving him the finger. And I think last year the Ravens did end up facing Seattle. The Ravens ended up beating Seattle, and Earl talked about how sweet of a victory it was. Dude, I mean, Seattle, they never did anything wrong to him. But even then, right, he's upset he didn't get the contract extension. He was upset how Seattle handled it. Nonetheless, Pete Carroll and John Harbaugh, two of the most player-friendly coaches in the league, got sick and tired of Earl Thomas. They did. I can't ignore that. That is not something I can just overlook. They got sick and tired of him, and it only took Harbaugh a year before he and the team said, we need to get rid of him. Now, Earl Thomas's play last season was not as good as it had been in Seattle. The defense was more difficult for him. He did something, because in Seattle, he did one thing. He played the high safety, and he did it at an elite level, but in Baltimore, they did a bit more. They were a bit more exotic. They blitzed more. They did some different things with him. His coverage grade was great. Everything else was ended up going down a bit. He still, though, had a pretty solid season, had a grade in the 70s. It was okay. Now the question is, though, what team is going to take a chance on him? And I think he's honestly entering Antonio Brown, not to the extent of Antonio Brown, but he's entering Antonio Brown territory. That's kind of how I would describe it. And here's what I mean by that. Antonio Brown, towards the end of his time in Pittsburgh, he was skipping meetings. He was kind of marching to the beat of his own drum. He was arguing with people. He was getting, disagreements with players. Even in his earlier tenure with Pittsburgh, guys like Ryan Clark, who was a great analyst on ESPN, talks about how he and Antonio Brown had issues. Antonio Brown had a giant ego. When he got paid, he had a giant ego. All about don't touch me, I'm the franchise. He was a very big me guy. Well, you look at Earl Thomas. What has he been doing recently? Skipping meetings for stupid reasons, getting in arguments with players in practice, which of course it happens, but the moment it turns physical, there's a problem. See, now, Earl Thomas has not done everything now, of course, and then of course, you have the off-the-field issue with his brother and his wife, where she held him at gunpoint. That's a whole thing, and, sometimes things happen on the outside of work, and it's life. Right? It's just a part of life. You can't always bring what happens off the field to the on-field stuff, but it was a distraction because it was insane. Antonio Brown had a lot of stuff going on off the field. A lot of the stuff was a distraction. It was pretty crazy. And so you look at the team, the Niners. The Niners, they could definitely use, I think they have is it Jimmy Ward? Who's their safety? He was pretty good. But they could definitely use another bookend safety. If they added Earl Thomas, they'd be great, and I'm sure they could get him at a discount. They said no. The Texans, they need all the help they can get right now in their secondary. They got some interesting pieces there, but they need a lot of help. They said no. In the Cowboys, Jerry Jones, when has he ever shied away from signing a troubled player? When has he ever shied away from signing a big name player? They haven't signed Earl Thomas. From Ian Rappaport's account, even though Jerry Jones did push back on them, Ian Rappaport pushed right back, said he trusts his sources, he trusts what he's heard. He said they're not gonna sign Earl Thomas. Now, one team that has been brought into the mix is the Browns. The Browns ended up losing one of their rookie safeties who was projected to be their starter. I think Grant Delpit, who is a safety out of LSU, was a really, really good safety there, was seen as a really good pick by them in the second round. He was shaping to be a starter. He's out for the year. Maybe they could sign Earl Thomas. People talking about they could maybe look to grab Earl Thomas. I don't know if they do it. I really don't. I don't know if they want to take that chance. The Browns, of all teams right now, they're trying to establish a culture. They're trying to finally get some kind of culture there, and they're hoping it can start with Stefanski and crew. Do they really want to bring in Earl Thomas into that defense? I don't know. I just don't. And I look kind of across the league, and I've heard some other names get brought up. Some people have said the Patriots. Maybe the Patriots could bring him in. They lost a bunch of pieces on defense. Obviously, they lost their other safety alongside McCourty. Who was it? Patrick Chung. They lost Patrick Chung. Maybe they could bring in Earl Thomas. Bill Belichick loves smart NFL players. He tells them to do what they do best. If you had Earl Thomas just play the high safety and everything, just do his job, not really do many exotic things or whatever, I'm sure Earl Thomas would probably flourish. But does Bill Belichick want a guy who's punching people in practices? I don't know. I think that's kind of the overarching theme is I don't know what's going to happen with Earl Thomas. I think he's still a talented player, but I do think there are some teams that look at his last year. They look at the fact he did struggle a bit. He is getting older. The Ravens cut him after 1 year. Look at what happened to Josh Rosen. He had his 1 year in Arizona, his rookie year. He gets traded to Miami. No team even talks about Josh Rosen. No one talks about him. No one brings up, there's no team that's even thought, hey, what if we trade for him? This guy was once upon a time a first round pick. Remember in his draft class? They were saying he was the most pro-ready quarterback. He was more pro-ready than Sam Darnold. He was more pro-ready than Baker, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. He was more ready than all those guys. And what exactly is going on with Josh Rosen? He's just in the ether. He's not even talked about. Teams have kind of, they look at him and they're like, there's a reason the Cardinals moved off of him. And that's the narrative you're pegged with. I think with Earl Thomas, he has that kind of narrative pegged on him. It's, hey, the Ravens moved off of him after 1 year. That's got to say something. His talent to them wasn't enough. But again, it goes to show, and I brought this up in my last podcast, it goes to show how important a culture is. It goes to show how important it is to have a culture that's strong, that is team first, where everyone is unified. And even though Earl Thomas might be a good player, you do have to weigh, will he disrupt the locker room? And that's why, it seems like if there's going to be any team that signs him, it's going to be one of those teams that just feels like they're a piece away and they can make it work, or it's going to be a bad team who doesn't really have a chance. Maybe they have a chance to make the playoffs, maybe they don't. Maybe it's a team that doesn't really have a culture. Maybe it's a team who's just really, really starving to get a big name on their defense or on their team in general. I honestly don't know. I really don't know where he's going to go from here. I don't know where to go from here. If you would have told me a year ago that Earl was going to go from best safety in the league, or at least, one of the top 3 safeties in the league, to high price free agent, to a year later being labeled as a locker room problem, who wants to even take a chance on him, and a team like even the Cowboys haven't signed him yet, I would have said you're insane. I would have thought, what happened to him? Did he break his leg again in Baltimore? Like, what happened to him? I would have never thought this would have happened to Earl. Never. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention to the Seahawks. Maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention to his actions in Seattle, to some of the reporting out of Seattle. I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't. But I do reflect on it, and I do have to admit, it's kind of scary that 2 of the most player-friendly coaches in the league both got tired of Earl. One of them got tired of him after 1 year. That doesn't bode well. And the Ravens, they're going to file a grievance. They're going to get the money back. I don't think Earl is going to be able to keep it. I know there's some people out there who say they should let him keep it. It's his money. He deserves it. No, I'm not one of those people who thinks he deserves it. No. If you violate a rule in your contract and it says that we can take some of your money back and you still violate it, dude, you lose the money. I mean, what, you think you can just punch a teammate and keep all of your money? That's ridiculous. You think that you can apparently get fined multiple times by your team and skip meetings because you need to wash your car and you think it's okay? No. I don't know if it's a case of Earl Thomas got a bit too full of himself. Maybe he got a bit too into his own hype. He's Earl Thomas. Maybe he's a bit too into his own name, kind of like Antonio Brown. I really don't know. But what a decline for Earl to go from best safety in the league, Legion of Boom, to now some of the top teams in the league don't even want to touch him. Some of these teams who even desperately need secondary help, like the Cowboys, like the Texans, don't want to touch him. I think that's crazy. Anyways, coming up next, final topic of the day. We're going to talk some Rodger Goodell. We're going to talk some Colin Kaepernick. I'm going to try and keep my cool during this, but there's a lot I want to say, and we're going to get into all of that coming up next. Thank you for listening.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about Earl Thomas. I talk about a fall from grace for Earl Thomas. My goodness. Dude was the best safety in the league just a year and a half ago or so, and now he can't even get on a team. And I'm not saying he won't get on a team, right? I don't want to put that mess up. I think he's going to get on a team. I just don't think it's going to be one of these top teams in the league. And if it is one of the top teams in the league, it's going to be because they're going to give him a very incentive-heavy deal. And they're going to tell him, you are on the thinnest of leashes. If you even sneeze in the wrong direction, you're gone. That's how I feel like this is all going to go. Anyways, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. Alright. I'm gonna try and keep my cool during this. I don't want to get too emotional, because this is gonna, I get, this kind of stuff, I get very heated. So, there was a man, 29-year-old man named Jacob Blake. He was shot 7 times in the back by police officers. He was unarmed. He was at his car with his kids in the car, all 3 of his kids, I believe. And, at the moment, he is paralyzed from the waist down, and you have protests all over the place again for Black Lives Matter, calling for the arrests of these police, calling for justice for Jacob Blake. I'm so glad he's alive. I hope he sues the crap out of the Kenosha police. I hope that he gets justice. I hope that the cop that shot him all those times goes to jail. It is ridiculous. This is the kind of stuff Colin Kaepernick was talking about. In 2016, when he started protesting, this is the kind of stuff he was talking about. And there was that segment of the population that understood what he was talking about, and they agreed. But there was also a large portion of people that couldn't understand what he was talking about. They were too focused on the fact that he was kneeling during the anthem to hear what he had to say. And one of those people was Rodger Goodell. Now, Rodger Goodell recently did an interview with a former NFL player. He's now an FS1 analyst, Emmanuel Acho. And Emmanuel Acho is a very good man. And look, Rodger Goodell himself, he's a very good man too. I'm not trying to say he's not. But Emmanuel Acho, good man, a person of color, a black man in America. And he has a show on YouTube called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And he brings people on and they have a bunch of conversations. He's had conversations with other celebrities. He'll bring anyone on. And he brought Rodger Goodell on. And they wanted to have a nice talk about the protesting during the national anthem, and he wanted to pick his brain. I was really excited to see this when I heard that this was going to be coming out. And then I watched it. And for an uncomfortable conversation, it looked like one of the most comfortable conversations I've ever seen in my life. It didn't seem like there was a lot of probing. I was waiting for the uncomfortable part, and I just never saw it. Now here, I want to bring up a few points from this interview, because it's kind of interesting to me. So Rodger Goodell, during the interview, he literally said, he's comfortable talking about race. Okay. So you're comfortable talking about race. That's good. He goes on to talk about how his father protested the Vietnam War. And he protested peacefully. So he was familiar with peaceful protest. He was familiar with fighting for what you believe in. He was familiar with fighting for change. This is all stuff he was familiar with. Emmanuel Acho goes on to ask him, he talks about the video that Rodger Goodell posted, where he talked about Black Lives Matter. He denounced, police brutality. He supported Black Lives Matter. He talked about the protesting during the anthem and how it wasn't about the flag. It was about these issues, all of this stuff. It was a great, great video. But it was like 4 years too late. At least in my mind. It was like 4 years too late. Now, better sooner than never, but I still think it was 4 years too late. But he asked him, in this video, you didn't necessarily apologize to Kaepernick. Like, and he asked him, how exactly, if you could in your own words, how would you apologize to Kaepernick? And he says he wished he had, quote, listened earlier to Colin Kaepernick. That's very interesting. This man, who claims he's so comfortable talking about race, when Kaepernick started protesting, he kind of did the opposite. He didn't listen, and instead sided with the President of the United States, who called them SOBs and said they should get out of the country if they have a problem with it, was calling for a boycott of the NFL, saying you're not going to watch games anymore if they're disrespecting the anthem, and Goodell tried to sway the players from kneeling. He ended up, I believe he made a deal with Malcolm Jenkins, donating money to black causes and black organizations or whatever in exchange that, they would hopefully stop kneeling. And Malcolm Jenkins, if I'm remembering correctly, when he kind of came out and talked about that, he said that he felt like it was time to take a next step forward, but there were those, I think mainly Eric Reed and Kaepernick, other guys who were saying that is not your call, and Eric Reed, of course, has a documented problem with Malcolm Jenkins. Although Jenkins will say that, they're fighting the same cause, it's just they're doing it a bit differently, whatever. Jim Trotter, who is a reporter who gets paid by Rodger Goodell, he saw this interview the same way I did. Basically, he said it looked like one of the most uncomfortable conversations he's ever seen in his life. He thought Emmanuel Acho let him off easy. He thought he didn't probe him enough. He thought he didn't ask the right questions. It seemed more like just a nice back and forth conversation rather than actually asking the uncomfortable conversations, rather than actually probing. Because here's what I mean by it. If Rodger Goodell one moment says he has no problem talking about race, he has no problem with it, and then the next second he goes into this soliloquy, if you will, and talks about how, he wishes he had listened to Colin Kaepernick sooner. Well, I would have immediately been like, well, why didn't you listen to him immediately? Now, Goodell did say that they tried to bring Kaepernick in and they tried to have a sit-down conversation with him, but Kaepernick just wasn't interested. Kaepernick has, I think, made it pretty clear with people, especially some of these bigger businesses who didn't take his side in the beginning. He's not going to take your side. Now, as soon as you basically let him know your original feelings, which is that you're either with him or against him, if you let him know you're against him off the bat, it seems like he's not going to be very apt to listen to you again. Now, while Kaepernick has been very clear that he does want to play again, right? There was that whole, quote, tryout that the NFL was gonna host for Kaepernick, and it just kind of turned into a sham because they wanted him to sign some waiver thing saying, essentially where he would waive his right to ever sue the NFL. He didn't want to do that. I think there was a whole other purpose to this quote tryout thing. I just wish the interview probed Rodger Goodell enough. The Milwaukee Bucks, they didn't play their game. The Milwaukee Bucks, they boycotted their game. LeBron James going to Twitter saying, F this, we need change. This is all in the wake of Jacobs' shooting. Again, so happy he is alive. I am this man, he has a family. He has 3 kids. They need their dad. And I really hope his paralysis is not permanent. I think it's a damn shame if it is permanent. That's a tragedy, but I'm glad he has his life. He can still live his life. He has his kids, and I think that is just something to be very, very thankful for. But it's something that should have never happened. What happened to him should have never happened, and it shouldn't happen to anybody. I say all this to say this. So obviously the NFL has lifted the restriction and teams can have players come in now. Teams can have players come in. They can check out guys who may have a little bit of an injury history. They can check out guys where they just kind of gauge where they are. Guys like Kevin White is getting tryouts. Kevin White was a first round pick of the Bears. He could never stay healthy. He's getting tryouts. Other guys are getting tryouts as well. Obviously, like Everson Griffin, he was brought in. He was a free agent for the longest time. He was brought in. I think at some point in time, Clowney will get brought in. It's really just a matter of, with him, it's a matter of his price tag. Because he's a guy who gets a lot of pressures, but he is also hurt, doesn't get really big sack numbers. He was originally looking for like a $20 million a year price tag. It just wasn't gonna happen. Just doesn't happen for players like that. The production, while it doesn't show up on the stat sheet, and the stat sheet at times is kind of what dictates your pay. I say all to say this though. I don't think Kaepernick's gonna get on a team. I think Kaepernick is done in the NFL. I really do. I remember hearing all the coach speak. Pete Carroll coming out saying, we wish we had signed Kaepernick originally. It just wasn't the fit. In one moment he's saying, well, Kaepernick, he was good enough to be a starter. So, we didn't want to bring him in. That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. And then Pete Carroll most recently said he doesn't remember why they didn't sign him, but he wished that they did. That's a lie. It is a flat out lie. And you say you're happy with your backup situation with Geno Smith. Let me put it this way. If Russell Wilson gets hurt, the season is over. If Russell Wilson had a season-ending injury, the season is over. Geno Smith will not save the team. And I'm not saying Colin Kaepernick would save the team either, but I trust Colin Kaepernick a hell of a lot more than I trust Geno Smith. I look at a team like the Chargers. The head coach came out, said they have Kaepernick on their workout list because he would kind of fit the system that they're going to run. He is on the workout list, but they do like their quarterback situation. You know what? You can bring players in now. Haven't heard anything about Kaepernick. There were all these reports. There were all these teams that were apparently really looking at Kaepernick, and they were really looking at bringing him in the wake of people no longer having a problem, or at least, let me not say that. Let me say the majority of people now no longer having a problem with protesting during the anthem. They now understand it, with the wake of George Floyd and the fact that Colin Kaepernick was right. You would look really, really good as a team if you did sign him. No one signed him. I haven't seen a single report about a team thinking about working him out. I haven't seen anything. And I think at this point I've kind of given up. I've kind of given up on Kaepernick getting onto a team. I think it's a shame. I think it is a sports tragedy that his career got cut so short. I mean, he is this generation's Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, obviously, he wouldn't go to war. And so then he did jail time. And he lost his career for a bit. And there was all the talk, would he ever be able to make it back? Would he ever be able to box again? And of course he did. And Muhammad Ali is Muhammad frickin' Ali. Colin Kaepernick kneeled. He did get to finish that season and everything, but he was kneeling, and then he's released by the Niners, and he never, ever even got a practice. He never even got to practice with a team. And every single team figured out some excuse to not give him a practice, right? It was gonna be the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens were gonna bring him in, and then they said, oh, well, his girlfriend called us out, and so we're not gonna bring him in anymore. And then the Seahawks, they actually bring him into Seattle, and then they just sat there and talked to him. And they didn't even see what he could do on the field, and they left that interview going, oh, well, he's a starter. He's a starter. We don't want to bring him in, if he's a starter, he can start in this league. What? What does that even mean? Every team figured out some reason to not sign him. The Broncos. Remember the Broncos? The Broncos at one point in time, they wanted to try and trade for Kaepernick. They were willing to engage the Niners in a trade for Kaepernick. They just wanted him to take a little bit less money. Kaepernick, he didn't want to take less money. Kaepernick, he liked his deal. He wanted to keep his deal. Denver, they didn't end up going through with the trade. But as soon as the Niners released Kaepernick made it very clear he was not looking for some top-of-the-line deal. He just wanted to get back on the team. Denver never even sniffed him. And so, I mean, I look at this conversation with Goodell, this supposed uncomfortable conversation with Goodell, and I'm just not satisfied with what he said. I mean, at this point, what is it? He's saying, oh, sorry, Kaepernick, wish I could have listened to you earlier, but, we didn't. You killed your career. This stuff is still happening in America. Maybe if we had just listened to you before, instead of making you, into kind of public enemy number one almost, in a lot of people's eyes. Maybe if we had just embraced you, maybe people would have listened to your message a bit more. I mean, what on earth? It's kind of, I don't know, it's a shame. And I know that this is a bit of a different topic to end the show on. This isn't exactly a very happy note. But right now it's not. 2020 hasn't been happy. The change, the protests that have been happening, the awareness that's been being brought to things is great. But my God, is it so overdue. It is so overdue. And guys like Kaepernick, they tried to bring this to everyone's attention 4 years ago. And only now, only this year, are people listening. It took within the span, I mean, because what was it? It all happened in like a week and a half. Arbery's death, his murder, George Floyd's murder, Breonna Taylor's murder, they all happened so close together, people finally said, oh my God, this is a problem. It took that. There were all the other deaths before, all the other murders before, at the hands of police or whoever. And no one really put any stock into what Kaepernick was saying. No one really put stock into police brutality. Only now has it become a global thing to where you have China and the UK and other countries where they're doing their own Black Lives Matter protests. Only now has it really hit the fan, and I think it's too late for Kaepernick. All these people, it was nice to think about. It was nice to think about that this was going to spark a team signing Kaepernick. I remember seeing all the headlines, all the articles. Oh man, there's like 5 teams really looking to get Kaepernick in the building. There's 5 teams really looking to bring him in. And it hasn't happened. The season is drawing near. We are in August. We are nearing the end of August. And Kaepernick, and the season is starting soon. And Kaepernick hasn't even gotten a phone call from all accounts. There would be an article posted if there was. There would be something posted. I would have seen something. It'd be trending. Anything involving Kaepernick at this point trends. It would be trending if a team called him. No one has. Too little too late. The apologies, great. Finally accepting there's a problem, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for now accepting there's a problem. That's not going to get Kaepernick his career back. It's just, it is a sports tragedy. It is an absolute shame what happened to Colin Kaepernick. He was taken out of the league in the prime of his career. The game now today more than ever suits his style of play. I feel like Kaepernick, if he had still in this league, I'm sure he'd be one of the top quarterbacks. He could run with the best of them, and his throwing ability was good enough to complement his outstanding running ability. Because he didn't just have wiggle, he had straight line speed and could just blow past people. And we're just not going to get to see it. It is one of the many sports tragedies out there. And I hope history, I hope the books, I hope everything, I hope they look very fondly of Colin Kaepernick. Especially at times like 2020. If there's anything 2020 has done, other than bringing light to Black Lives Matter and really showing what this is about, it has made Colin Kaepernick look like a damn saint. And it kind of put the NFL in a very tough position because the owner had to, Rodger Goodell had to come out and say, we were wrong. We were wrong and we should have listened. It's crazy. It's really crazy. I know that wasn't the greatest note to end the show on, but I needed to talk about it. I really did. And the Bucks canceling. They decide they're saying it's a boycott. It's like a strike. Boycotting is when you don't watch it. They're the employees. They're going on strike. The Bucks, Rockets, all these teams. Nope, not playing. And I can't say that they're wrong for doing so. Anyways, thank you for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you. And have a good night. And stay safe out there.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.